Raising with Serenity. Stoic Principles for 21st Century Parents by Fernando Arcos Vasquez. For every parent who has ever sat on the edge of their child's bed, wondering if they are doing this right, you are. Prologue. An afternoon at the park. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The sun still carried a bit of warmth, and the park was full of children. There was a girl sitting alone on a bench, watching the others run and shout. It wasn't that she didn't want to play. It was that the world, sometimes, came at her too loudly. Her father watched her from a distance. He didn't know whether to go over, to speak to her, or simply let her be. He felt that familiar mix of love and confusion parents know when they don't know what to do. That scene, that girl, that father, was the starting point for this book. We raise children in a fast, loud, and expectation-filled world. We want them to be happy, to make friends, to adapt. And when something in them doesn't fit neatly into that mold, we worry. We wonder if we are doing something wrong. This book does not intend to give you perfect answers. It intends to give you a compass. That compass is called Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophy born in ancient Greece, practiced by emperors and slaves alike. Marcus Aurelius used it to govern an empire. Epictetus used it to survive slavery. Seneca wrote it in letters to his friend. All of them found in it something humans still need today: a way to live calmly in a world we cannot fully control. What does this have to do with raising children? Everything. Because parenting is not about control. It is about accompaniment. And to accompany well, we first need to understand ourselves. In this book, you will find 7 Stoic principles: control, discipline, perception, acceptance, responsibility, clarity, and truth, presented through a simple story, that of an ordinary family, with its good days and its hard ones. Each chapter has a story, a reflection, and a concrete practice. You don't need to be a philosopher. You don't need to have read Marcus Aurelius. You only need to want to raise children with more intention and serenity. Let's begin. Introduction: Stoicism for Parents. Before we get into the chapters, one thing is worth clarifying. Stoicism does not mean being cold, insensitive, or enduring everything without complaint. Stoicism means knowing what depends on you and what does not, and acting accordingly. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. Epictetus. For a parent, this is profoundly liberating. Because parenting is full of things we cannot control: our child's temperament, how other children treat them, whether they have a hard day at school, whether they cry for no apparent reason. What we can control is our response, our presence, our words, the environment we create at home. How to use this book. This book is organized into 7 chapters, one for each principle. Each chapter begins with a scene from the Ramos family, a fictional but very real family, and ends with a reflection and a concrete practice. You can read it straight through or one chapter per week. You can underline it, write in the margins, share it with your partner. What matters is that it serves you. The stories are fictional but inspired by real situations that many families experience. If at any point you see yourself reflected, it's because all parents at some point have been there. Chapter 1: Control. Knowing what depends on you. Some things are in our control and others not. Epictetus, Enchiridion. Sophia was 9 years old and did not want to go to her classmate Daniela's birthday party. "I don't want to," she said simply, without drama, without tears. Just a quiet, "I don't want to," that fell on her mother Laura like a bucket of cold water. Laura had spent weeks listening to other mothers talk about the party. She had bought the gift ahead of time. She had imagined Sophia playing, laughing, making friends. "But you have to go. Daniela is your classmate." "I don't like Daniela." "Sophia, you don't say that." "But it's true." Laura went to the kitchen to breathe. She knew that if she kept talking in that moment, she would say something she would regret. She poured herself a glass of water and thought, "What depends on me here?" I can talk to Sophia calmly. I can explain the importance of being kind even when we are not someone's friend. I can listen to why she doesn't want to go. What does not depend on me? Whether Sophia wants to go to the party, whether she likes Daniela, whether she is the social girl I sometimes fantasize she would be. Laura went back to Sophia's room. Can you tell me why you don't want to go? Sophia hesitated, then said, Daniela always interrupts me when I talk, and at parties there's a lot of noise and I don't know who to be with. Laura sat down beside her. That makes a lot of sense, she said. The principle of control in parenting. The Greek philosopher Epictetus divided the world into two columns. In the first, what depends on us, our thoughts, our decisions, our attitude. In the second, what does not depend on us, the weather, what others think, the future. The source of almost all human suffering, said Epictetus, lies in confusing the two columns. In wanting to control what we cannot, in feeling responsible for what is not ours. For parents, this confusion is especially tempting. We want our children to be happy, to have friends, not to suffer. And when something turns out differently than we expected, we experience it as our own failure. But your child's happiness is not something you can manufacture. You can create favorable conditions. You can be present. You can listen. That does depend on you. Control is not rigidity. There is a trap here that is easy to fall into, confusing Stoic control with authoritarian control. Stoicism does not say you should control your child. It says you should control your own reaction. There is an enormous difference between a parent who controls the child, who decides for them, who does not tolerate their emotions, who imposes, and a parent who controls themselves, who chooses their words carefully, who does not react from fear or pride, who acts from calmness. That second parent is not perfect, but they are conscious. Applied to sensitive children. Some children perceive the world with more intensity than others. They feel sounds more strongly, changes more abruptly, others' emotions more heavily. They are not broken, and they are not exaggerating. Their nervous system simply has a different threshold. For parents of these children, the principle of control is especially valuable. Because there will be many situations, parties, routine changes, hard days at school, where the instinct will be to try to fix the child, to make them more sociable, more tolerant, different. That does not depend on you. What does depend on you is knowing them deeply, preparing them for difficult moments, creating a space at home where they can rest from the noise of the world, teaching them, little by little, to know themselves. Chapter: Reflection. The principle of control is not about dominating the world or your child. It is about honestly recognizing the limits of your power and acting with all your energy within those limits. Ask yourself today, how much energy do I spend trying to change things that don't depend on me? How much energy do I give to what I actually can do? A parent who knows what depends on them acts with precision. They don't exhaust themselves chasing ghosts. They direct their strength toward where they can make a real difference. Their presence, their listening, their example. Practice for today. This week, when you feel frustrated by something your child does, pause and ask yourself, does this depend on me or not? Make a list of 3 parenting things you feel should be different. For each one, ask, what part of this can I actually influence? Focus only on that part. At the end of the day, ask your child how their day was, with no agenda, without wanting to fix anything. Just listen. Chapter 2: Discipline. Habit as the architecture of character. First, endure, then abstain. Epictetus. Andres was 7 years old and hated math. Every afternoon at 5, the same battle arrived. Backpack open on the table, the exercise notebook, and Andres staring out the window with the face of someone who would rather be anywhere else in the universe. His father, Rodrigo, had tried everything. Rewards if he finished quickly. Punishments if he didn't start. Sitting beside him for a full hour. Nothing worked for more than 2 days. One afternoon, instead of sitting across from Andres with the face of a referee, Rodrigo sat beside him and asked, "What is it you hate most about math?" Andres thought about it. that I don't know if I'm doing it right and I'm afraid of getting it wrong. Rodrigo was quiet for a moment, then said, I was afraid of getting things wrong too. Do you know what helped me? Practicing even when it didn't come out right. Many times. And then it came out a little better. And then a little more. The principle of discipline. For the Stoics, discipline was not punishment, it was practice. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who wrote the Meditations, one of the great Stoic books, got up every morning and wrote. Not because it was easy, not because he always felt like it. He did it because he understood that character is built through repetition, not inspiration. Stoic discipline has 3 layers. The first is the discipline of actions, doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like it. Getting up, studying, keeping commitments. The second is the discipline of words, thinking before speaking, choosing carefully what we say and how we say it, especially when we are angry. The third is the discipline of thought, not letting fears, resentments, or fantasies govern our mind. Observing them without being swept away. Discipline is not blind obedience. A frequent mistake in parenting is confusing discipline with obedience. The goal of discipline is not a child who does what you say. The goal is a child who knows why they do what they do. That difference is enormous. A child who obeys out of fear stops doing so the moment the adult is not watching. A child who has internalized the value of discipline, who understands that effort leads to competence, that practice reduces fear, that habits are the foundation of character, carries that compass with them. How do you achieve that second kind? With patience, with example. And with conversations like the one Rodrigo had with Andres. Not from authority, but from shared experience. Small habits, big changes. The Stoics believed in the daily, consistent practice of small virtues. Not in grand heroic gestures, but in daily habits that over time shape character. For children, this is especially relevant. Their brains are in full formation. Habits installed in childhood, the habit of trying even when it's hard, of asking for help when needed, of recognizing one's own mistakes, become part of who they are. You don't need big changes. You need small, consistent habits. 5 minutes of reading before bed, being grateful for something before dinner, putting away what was used before going out to play. Small structures that give the child a sense of agency and competence. The parent's role. Discipline is not preached, it is modeled. Our children watch us with extraordinary attention. They see how we react when we are frustrated. They see whether we keep our promises. They see whether we are capable of recognizing our mistakes. A parent who gets up to exercise even when it's hard, who finishes what they start, who does not lose their temper at the first difficulty, is teaching discipline without saying a single word. The best lesson is the one that needs no explanation. Chapter Reflection. Discipline is not about making children suffer to make them strong. It is about helping them discover they are capable of more than they think. When a child learns that they can do something difficult, a hard math problem, an uncomfortable conversation, a day without giving up, they learn something about themselves that no reward can teach them. Your job is not to push. It is to accompany, with consistency, and without giving up first yourself. Practice for today. Identify one small habit you want to install in your family this week. Just one. Do it at the same time, every day. When your child avoids something difficult, instead of scolding them, tell them about something you find hard too. Normalize effort. Model the discipline of thought. The next time you are about to react impulsively with your child, take a pause of 3 breaths before speaking. Chapter 3. Perception. The world we see depends on how we look. Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. Epictetus. It was the first day of school after vacation. Valentina, 8 years old, had not slept well. When she arrived at school, her teacher greeted her with a smile and asked how her summer had been. Valentina did not answer. She stared at the floor. On the way home, her mother Elena asked, "How did it go?" "The teacher hates me." Elena took a deep breath. "Why do you think that?" She asked how I was, and everyone looked at me. And you think that means she hates you? Valentina thought. I don't know. It felt that way. Sometimes things feel one way and are another, said Elena. What else could it mean that she asked how you were? Valentina looked out the car window. That she wanted to know. Exactly, said Elena. That she wanted to know. The principle of perception. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology has confirmed. We do not react to facts, but to our interpretation of facts. A child who says nobody loves me after a classmate didn't play with them is not describing reality. They are describing their interpretation of reality. And that interpretation, if not questioned, becomes their reality. For sensitive children, and for many adults too, this mechanism works with particular intensity. A neutral tone of voice can be read as anger. A distracted classmate can feel like rejection. A minor criticism can feel like a collapse. It's not that they are wrong, it's that their lens is calibrated differently. Teaching children to question their interpretation. The parent's task is not to tell the child they are wrong. It is to help them expand the possibilities. When Elena asks Valentina what else could it mean, she is doing something very valuable. She is teaching her that between the fact and the conclusion there is a space, and that we live in that space. This skill, questioning the first interpretation, looking for other possible explanations, is one of the most valuable a child can develop. It is the foundation of emotional resilience. With young children, this is done with simple questions. Why do you think they did that? Is there another way to see what happened?
Yeah.
What would you tell a friend if the same thing happened to them? The parent's own perception. But there is another perception to work on, our own. How do we see our children? As problems to solve, as extensions of ourselves, as complete people with their own ways of being in the world? A parent who sees their shy child as a child with socialization problems sees them differently from one who sees them as a child who prefers depth over quantity. The two perceptions lead to different strategies, different conversations, different relationships. The Stoics constantly invited us to question our perceptions, not because they are worthless, but because they may be limited. And when we expand how we see our children, we also expand what is possible for them. The child who feels too much. There are children who perceive the world with an intensity that can be overwhelming, not only emotionally, but also sensorially. Sounds are louder, lights brighter, changes more abrupt. For these children, the principle of perception has an additional dimension, learning that what they feel is real, but not always the only possible reality. It is not about telling them, don't exaggerate. It is about accompanying them to develop a language for what they feel, and then exploring together whether there are other ways to interpret the situation. I know that felt very intense. What do you think the other person was thinking? With time and practice, that space between the stimulus and the reaction widens, and in that space, freedom grows. Chapter Reflection. Our children learn to interpret the world by watching how we interpret it. If we react to every setback as though it were a catastrophe, they learn that the world is dangerous. If we show them that between the fact and the conclusion there is space for asking questions, they learn that they have agency over how they experience things. Perception is not destiny. It is a habit, and habits can be changed. Practice for today. The next time your child comes home with a negative conclusion about themselves or others, before contradicting them, ask, is there another way to see that? Observe this week how you describe your child when you talk about them with others. What words do you use? Do they reflect the complete person they are? When you find yourself in a frustrating situation, practice asking yourself, is this a fact or is it my interpretation of the fact? Chapter 4, Acceptance. Loving what is. Love the things which happen to you and are spun for your destiny. What is more fitting for you? Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. Mariana had spent weeks wondering when her daughter Clara, 7 years old, would be like the other girls. The other girls seemed to navigate birthday parties without drama. They asked for what they wanted. They formed groups. They said goodbye with hugs. Clara needed to know in advance who would be there. She needed a quiet corner when she arrived. She needed time to warm up before joining the others. And sometimes she simply needed to leave early. One Sunday, after a party that ended in tears, Mariana sat with Clara in the car without starting the engine. Both of them in silence. "I'm sorry," said Clara. "For what?" asked Mariana. "For being this way." Mariana felt something break in her chest. She took her daughter's hand. "Clara, you do not have to apologize for being who you are." The principle of acceptance. Amor fati, love of fate, is one of the most beautiful concepts in Stoicism. It does not mean passive resignation. It means embracing what is, including what is difficult, as part of the life you have, and that is worth living. In parenting, acceptance has two dimensions. The first is accepting your child as they are, not as you wish they were, not as you imagined, not as the neighbor's child seems to be, as they are, with their particularities, their rhythms, their strengths, and their areas for growth. The second is teaching them to accept themselves, not to apologize for existing, not to be ashamed of their needs, to learn to know themselves with honesty and with care at the same time. Acceptance is not giving up. There is a frequent confusion, believing that acceptance means doing nothing. Stoic acceptance is not passivity, it is clarity. Accepting that your child needs more structure does not mean leaving them without support. It means designing that support from the reality of who they are, not from the fantasy of who they should be. Accepting that they have social difficulties does not mean not accompanying them. It means accompanying them from where they are, at their pace, without pretending the process can be faster than it can be. Acceptance frees up energy. The energy you spent fighting against what is now available to work with what is. The message children hear. Children are extraordinarily sensitive to whether they are accepted or merely tolerated. A child can feel when their parents are proud of them just as they are, and when they are waiting for them to be different. That difference, between being accepted and being tolerable, can profoundly shape the image the child builds of themselves. When Mariana tells Clara that she does not have to apologize for being who she is giving her something no therapy or book can give entirely: the certainty that she is enough. That is the greatest gift of acceptance. Accepting yourself first. There is one acceptance that comes before all others: acceptance of yourself as a parent. No one is born knowing how to raise children. No one does it perfectly. There will be days when you lose your patience, say something you regret, make a decision that later seems wrong. The Stoics did not seek perfection. They sought progress. The difference is crucial. A parent who accepts themselves with their limitations can look at themselves honestly without sinking into guilt. And a parent who can do that has much more to give. Chapter Reflection. Acceptance is not the end of the road. It is the starting point. Only from the acceptance of what really is, your child, yourself, the situation, can you work with clarity. Ask yourself, is there something about my child that I am rejecting rather than accepting? What would it cost me to embrace that with the same love as the rest? The phrase children need to hear and to feel is simple. I love you as you are, not as you will be. As you are right now. Practice for today. This week, say out loud, to your child and also to yourself, something you accept and appreciate about them, including something you normally see as a difficulty. If your child apologizes for something related to the way they are, instead of saying, it doesn't matter, say, you don't have to apologize for being who you are. Write a note, for yourself, not for anyone else, about something in your own parenting that you accept today that once was hard to accept. Chapter 5. Responsibility. Taking ownership without overloading. Each person does harm or good to themselves. Seneca. Diego, 10 years old, came home furious. He had lost his turn on the soccer team because he had arrived late to practice twice in a row. It's Mom's fault for always running late taking me, he said, throwing his backpack on the floor. His father, Thomas, listened without interrupting, then asked, "How many times were you late?" "Two." "And whose responsibility was it that you arrived on time?" Diego looked at him with an unfriendly face. "Mom's." "Only hers?" Thomas waited. Diego was quiet for a moment. "Mine too. I could have warned her earlier." "Yes," said Thomas. "And now that you know that, what are you going to do differently?" The principle of responsibility. One of the most common mistakes in modern parenting is protecting children from the natural consequences of their actions. We do it with good intentions. We don't want them to suffer. We don't want them to fail. We don't want life to be unfair to them. But when we rescue a child from all their consequences, we teach them something dangerous, that their actions carry no weight, that there will always be someone who fixes what they break. The Stoics understood responsibility as something liberating, not as punishment. Taking ownership of what is yours is recognizing that you have power over your life. Responsibility is not guilt. There is an important difference between responsibility and guilt. Guilt looks backward. I did something bad. I am bad. Responsibility looks forward. Something went wrong. What can I do now? When Tomas asks Diego what he is going to do differently, he is not punishing him. He is inviting him to exercise his agency, to see that he has power over what comes next. Teaching children responsibility is not teaching them to flagellate themselves for their mistakes. It is teaching them to recognize them honestly and to ask, "What's next?" The example is the lesson. Responsibility is also taught through the example of parents. What do we do when we make a mistake with our children? Do we blame them for provoking it? Do we minimize? Or do we say naturally, "I was wrong. I'm sorry. Next time I will do this differently"? A parent who acknowledges their mistakes teaches their child that mistakes are part of life, not the end of the world, and that taking ownership of them is a sign of strength, not weakness. Responsibility and sensitive children. For children with high emotional sensitivity, responsibility can be complicated territory. These children tend to be very self-critical. When something goes wrong, they may go straight to the conclusion that they are bad, clumsy, or worthless. In these cases, the parent's work is twofold: help them recognize their part in what happened, and at the same time, not let that responsibility turn into shame. Yes, you were late and that had a consequence. That doesn't mean you are irresponsible forever. It means this time it turned out this way. What do we learn? The responsibility that liberates always includes the possibility of starting again. Chapter Reflection. Teaching responsibility is not leaving children to suffer alone. It is accompanying them through the natural consequences of their actions, with presence and without unnecessary rescuing. The most powerful question you can ask your child after a mistake is not, "Why did you do that?" but, "What are you going to do now?" And for us as parents, are we capable of saying "I was wrong" out loud in front of our children? That moment, that example of honesty with responsibility, is worth more than 1,000 lectures. Practice for today. The next time your child blames someone for something, instead of defending or attacking, ask, "What part of this depended on you?" Look for a moment this week where you, as a parent, made a mistake. Acknowledge it out loud in front of your child. When your child makes a mistake, resist the impulse to rescue them from all consequences. Accompany them through them. Chapter 6, Clarity. Seeing things as they are. First, do not be carried away by impressions. Say, "Wait, let me see what you are and where you come from." Epictetus. There was a phrase Isabel used a lot with her children. "Calm down. It's not a big deal." She said it when her older son got frustrated with video games, when her younger daughter cried because a friend didn't invite her, when anything went off script. One day, her older son Mateo said something that made her think, "Mom, when you say that, I feel like what I'm feeling doesn't matter." Isabel stopped. She had been saying that phrase for years, thinking it was helpful, that it helped her children not to exaggerate. But Mateo was right. What it actually communicated was that their emotions were a problem. "You're right," she said. "I'm sorry. Tell me what happened." The principle of clarity. The Stoics sought clarity as one of their fundamental values. Not the clarity of having all the answers, but the clarity of seeing things as they are, without exaggerating, but also without minimizing. In parenting, the lack of clarity manifests in two opposite ways. The first is catastrophizing, turning any difficulty into a disaster. If they don't have friends now, they will never have them. If they struggle to read at 6, something is wrong. If they cry at the party, there is a serious problem. The second is minimizing, downplaying what the child feels. It's not a big deal. Other children have real problems. You'll get over it. Neither position helps. Clarity is in the middle, recognizing what it really is, no more and no less. Clarity about our children. Seeing our children with clarity means seeing them whole. Not only their difficulties, not only their strengths, both. A parent who only sees what worries them about their child misses all that is already working. And a parent who only sees the positive may become blind to something that does require attention. Clarity allows us to say honestly and without drama, my child has these strengths and these areas where they need support. What do I do with that? Clarity about emotions. One of the greatest gifts we can give our children is helping them have clarity about their emotions. Children, especially younger ones, don't always have words for what they feel. They know something weighs on them, but they don't know what. And that confusion can turn into bad moods, crying for no apparent reason, behaviors that puzzle adults. Our job is not to tell them what they feel. It is to help them name what is already there. You seem frustrated. Is that what you're feeling? Are you sad or angry, or both? Can you tell me what's weighing on you? With these questions, we are not analyzing the child. We are accompanying them in knowing themselves better. Clarity in communication. Clarity also applies to how we communicate with our children. Many family conflicts come from imprecise words. You always do the same thing. You never listen to me. Everything is a problem with you. The always and never are rarely true. And when we use them, the message that reaches the child is not the one we want to send. Clear communication speaks about the concrete. When you came home late without telling me, I was worried. When you raise your voice, it's hard for me to listen. Specific, direct, without dramatizing. Children understand better when we speak clearly, and when they understand, they can respond. Chapter Reflection. Clarity is not emotional distance. A clear parent can also be a very loving parent. Clarity simply means that what you see and what you say corresponds to what really is. This week, practice seeing your child with fresh eyes. Not the child who worries you, not the ideal child. The real child, with everything that implies. And practice clarity in your words too. Replace one always or never with a specific description of what actually happened. Practice for today. Eliminate this week the phrases, it's not a big deal, and calm down. Instead, say, tell me what happened. When your child comes to you with a strong emotion, help them name it precisely. Is it fear, frustration, shame? The more precise the name, the more manageable it becomes. Write 3 real strengths of your child, things they genuinely do well or that are part of who they are. Read them when the day is hard. Chapter 7. Truth. Living and parenting with authenticity. If you seek tranquility, do less. Or more accurately, do what is essential. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. Paula was 11 years old and had a question turning in her mind for weeks. One day, taking advantage of being alone with her father in the car, she asked it, Dad, are you happy? Her father, Carlos, took a moment to answer. He could have said, of course, very happy. It was the easy answer. But Paula was looking at him with a seriousness that asked for something more. Most of the time, yes, said Carlos. There are hard days. There are things that are difficult for me, but in general, I like the life I have. Paula nodded. And what do you do when the days are hard? I try to remember what is working, and I talk to the people I love. Paula looked out the window. Thank you for not saying you are always happy. The principle of truth. The Stoics considered truth a central virtue, not as cruelty, but as respect. Telling the truth, to others and to ourselves, was the foundation of a life with integrity. In parenting, truth has several dimensions. The first is being honest with our children about reality, not protecting them from everything difficult, but calibrating what they can understand and accompanying them with the truth that belongs to them. The second is being honest about ourselves. As Carlos did, not pretending life is perfect, but showing that it is possible to live well even with its difficulties. The third is creating an environment where the child can also be honest, where they can say, I don't want to go, I'm scared, I made a mistake, without fear of being judged. The trap of the perfect life. We live in a time when the pressure to display a perfect life is enormous. Social media amplifies this. We see smiling families, flawless vacations, children who always seem content. And without realizing it, many parents bring that pressure home. Pressure to be the perfect parent, to have the perfect child, to have everything always under control. The problem is not just the exhaustion that generates. The problem is what it teaches the child. A child who grows up seeing only the perfect face of their parents learns that difficult emotions must be hidden, that problems are shameful, that real life is a failure compared to what it should be. A parent who shows their humanity, with their doubts, their efforts, and their limitations, gives their child an invaluable gift, the certainty that being human is enough. Truth and trust. Children, especially the most observant and sensitive, detect the incongruence between what we say and who we are. If we say anger is okay but react with hostility when we are angry, the child learns the second. If we say mistakes are part of learning but we fall apart at our own mistakes, the child learns the second. Trust is built with consistency, not with perfection. A parent who does not always have the answers but is honest enough to say, I don't know, is more trustworthy than one who always has an answer, even if it isn't true. Truth about who your child is. There is one truth that deserves its own paragraph. The truth about who your child really is. And every child arrives with a particular way of being in the world. Some are shy. Some are intense. Some need more time to warm up. Some feel everything more strongly. Some prefer depth over breadth in their relationships. None of these characteristics is a defect. They are ways of being. And the truth, the honest and loving truth, is that your child does not need to be fixed. They need to be known. That is perhaps the most important truth in this book. Chapter Reflection. The authentic life is not the life without problems. It is the life in which problems can be named, faced, and crossed with integrity. When we are honest with our children, about life, about ourselves, about them, we give them a solid foundation. Not the illusion that everything will always be fine, but the certainty that when things are not fine, there will be truth and companionship. And that certainty is far more valuable than perfection. Practice for today. This week, when your child asks how you are, answer honestly. Not with drama, but not with the automatic, just fine, either. Create a moment, in the car, before bed, at dinner, where both you and your child can say one real thing about their day. Something good and something hard. Identify one uncomfortable truth about your child that you have been avoiding. Not to fix it today, but to see it clearly and with love. Epilogue. Back to the park. Let's go back for a moment to the park in the prologue, to that girl sitting on the bench, to that father who did not know whether to go over. This time, let's imagine the father does go over. He sits beside her. He says nothing for a moment. Do you prefer to be here? He asks at last. The girl nods. That's okay. And the two of them stay there, watching the other children run, without hurry, without drama, without needing the moment to be different from what it is. That is Stoicism in parenting. It is not about having all the answers. It is about being present with what is. It is not about raising invulnerable children. It is about raising children who know they can get through the hard parts. It is not about being the perfect parent. It is about being the real parent, the one who makes mistakes, learns, apologizes, and keeps trying. The 7 principles in this book, control, discipline, perception, acceptance, responsibility, clarity, and truth, are not a to-do list. They are a way of looking, a compass. You don't have to apply them all at once. You don't have to be perfect in any of them. It is enough that, from time to time, you ask yourself, does this depend on me? Am I seeing things as they are? Am I being honest? Am I present? If the answer is yes, even for a few minutes, you are doing it right. And if the answer is no, there is always a next moment to try again. Thank you for reading this book. Thank you for wanting to raise children with more intention. And thank you for remembering on the hard days that the intention is already half the journey. Quick reference: the 7 Stoic Principles. A reference to carry with you. 1. Control. Distinguish what depends on you from what does not. Focus your energy only on the first. 2. Discipline. Character is built with small, consistent habits. Model what you want to teach. 3. Perception. Between the fact and the conclusion, there is a space. Teach your child to question the first interpretation. 4. Acceptance. Accept your child as they are, not as you wish they were. That acceptance is the foundation of all real growth. 5. Responsibility. Teach ownership without guilt. The key question: what are you going to do now? 6. Clarity. See and communicate things as they are. Don't catastrophize or minimize. Know always or never. Speak about the concrete. 7. Truth. Be honest with yourself and your children. Trust is built with consistency, not perfection. Recommended reading. If this book sparked your interest in Stoicism applied to daily life, here are some works to continue the journey. Classic Stoic works. Meditations. Marcus Aurelius. The personal diary of an emperor who practiced Stoicism in silence, without anyone knowing. Enchiridion. Epictetus. A brief, direct manual. The essence of Stoicism in few pages. Letters to Lucilius. Seneca. Letters on friendship, time, death, and the well-lived life. Modern Stoicism. The Obstacle is the Way. Ryan Holiday. How to Use Difficulties as a Springboard. How to Be a Stoic. Massimo Pigliucci. An accessible academic guide to contemporary Stoicism. Conscious Parenting. The Whole Brain Child. Daniel J. Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. Neuroscience applied to parenting with a lot of common sense. Atomic Habits. James Clear. Understanding how habits form and how to help children build their own. Acknowledgements. This book was born from a simple question that many parents ask themselves in silence. Am I doing this right? The answer from Stoicism, a philosophy more than 2,000 years old, is equally simple. If you are trying to act well, if you are honest with yourself, if you learn from your mistakes, yes, you are doing it. Thank you to all the fathers and mothers who ask themselves that question. Who get up every morning to try again? Who read books like this one looking for tools, not because something is broken, but because they want more. And thank you to the children, the calm and the intense, the sociable and the reserved, those who adapt easily and those who need more time, for teaching us what philosophers can only intuit, that life, in all its complexity, is worth it.